On Thursday, Elchanan flew back from Israel. So good morning, everyone, first of all. Elchanan flew back from Israel and Shalvie and her girls were on the flight. So we thought, right, she's coming for Shabbat. Can we grab her on Monday morning? And luckily for our wonderful Living with Emunah community, Shalvie was available this morning. So we brought her along with her girls. And it's a very special day to be able to come together. So there's two things that I wanted to share. A big part of our Emunah journey has been really talking about the hostages. And I just saw, I don't know if other people saw, I think it was yesterday that Sasha and Sapir, who I was wearing his band for months and months and months, literally till it fell apart. And they just got married. And we've spoken so much about their story, about how she kind of had found faith and she was convinced that their relationship wasn't going to last because he hadn't. And then they got married because he found God while he was in the tunnels in Gaza. And it's just one of these like unbelievably uplifting, beautiful stories that came out of something that's so difficult and so tragic. I spilt water, that was what that's all about. So that's one very special thing that we have. And the other special thing we have today is we are being joined by the most amazing Libby. Now, many of you will have heard from Alison and from us sharing about how this gorgeous baby and her family are such a big part of our Emunah journey. And Libby has a very important scan this afternoon. And today's learning and inspiration should be as a refuah for her that, please God, the results should be good and she should continue growing in strength and she should continue developing so beautifully and giving so much joy and nachas to all her family. So we're praying for refuah shalema for Libby, Sarah, Bat Yehudit Surim. And we have spent lots of time, Shalvie, talking about Moshiach. And sometimes that can make us feel very anxious.
Nearly 3,000 years?
Yeah, well, in our group for the last, I don't know how many, 18 months maybe it's been. But I'm speaking about Moshiach, and it feels like something we don't really know what we're talking about. And we wanted to hear from you maybe a little bit about the idea of Moshiach, the realistic side of it. Kind of sometimes it just feels too up in the air. And then we can also open up for people for questions.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm here because no one can say no to the Feldmans. I got a message from Jacqueline. She's like, so you'll come? I said, well, I guess yes. To be careful not to talk to Jacqueline too much, because then I'll end up doing things. But I'll start like this. I was never fascinated by the topic of Mashiach. I didn't consider myself to be a very Mashiach-centered Jew. I'm sure Marcus heard me say that before. And as Jacqueline said, I think Mashiach is something that people are very worried, maybe is the wrong word, but have their mind on a lot lately. And there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of questions. And so at a certain point, I decided to really kind of deep dive into the whole Mashiach sugya and just like learn it out, to really just to have the sense of how I can create, I guess, internally my own sense of I didn't want to feel like I was living with like cognitive dissonance of like, well, Mashiach is something that's so out there, don't know what it is, but I want it to happen, but I don't even know what it is, but I don't even know what it means, but I'm meant to. It just felt too like a little bit intellectually dishonest. So I wanted to learn what I needed to know and what we don't know, and kind of have my own, like navigate my own path so that I could feel like when I say I believe, I believe Mashiach's gonna come, that didn't feel like just lip service. It actually felt like something, it meant something to me. Did that resonate with people? I also feel like Mashiach sometimes is synonymous with two different alternative things. The one thing is like, when donkeys fly, when Mashiach comes, it's kind of saying like, that time which lives beyond time. I'm not even sure it's going to happen. That's when that's going to happen. When Mashiach comes, right? I have 3 kids that have celiac disease, and they all say like, we'll be able to eat meat when Mashiach comes. And like in my head, I'm thinking, AKA like never, right? That's your genetic buildup. You're not gonna, right? So that's the one alternative. And the other one is that like hyper sensitive, excited. Like, anyone ever been on a WhatsApp group in the last 3 years where someone has posted like, you see Mashiach is coming? Anyone? Yeah. Often people are like, yes, you see Mashiach is coming. And every time I saw that, I'm like, really? How do you know? Because last I checked, we don't have prophecy. And I'm not sure if Mashiach's coming. I can imagine that in many places in like the Warsaw ghetto, maybe they thought Mashiach was coming also. So like kind of between those two, fluctuating between those two extremes, both make me feel uncomfortable, I would say. That like today's the day, Mashiach's coming mentality, and the alternative, which is like eons away, don't even know if it's going to happen. It's like a fairy tale, like Harry Potter, Mashiach, all in the same category. So, by the way, feel free to like jump in with questions as I go. I know you said you can follow with questions, but this isn't really a sheer per se, meaning I could spend 12 hours talking about the, Jewish material on the Mashiach, but I'd like to hear where you want to take it. Let's start with the Ani Ma'amin. We're all familiar with those words, Ani Ma'amin be'emunah shalema, I believe with absolute clarity, beviat HaMashiach, in the coming of Mashiach, and even though he is taking his pretty time, im kol zeh, despite that, achakelo, I will wait for him, b'chol yom sheyavo, that he may come any day. Everyone familiar with that? Right, it's one of the 13 Ani Ma'amins that were written by the Rambam. The Maimonides wrote his understanding of what Jewish fundamental principles of belief are, and he lists them in 13 different categories, and this is number 12. Okay? 12, yes. The actual wording of the Ani Ma'amin was probably not written by the Rambam. The idea was written by the Rambam. Someone took it and wrote it as one of the Ani Ma'amins. The Rambam, on the one hand, says that. On the other hand, the Rambam in his Mishnah Torah says that people shouldn't think too hard about Mashiach. He says because we don't know, we've never been there, there's so much literature that's ambiguous, and it's not really based in anything, and you can't like open the Tanakh and find out what Mashiach is going to be like. So people shouldn't think about it too much because, and his wording is very powerful, he says it's not going to lead you to love Hashem or fear him. In other words, the Rambam's not convinced that there's too much practical, and this is living Emunah, right? A lot of what you talk about, and what I understand from this moving group of people who get together, is that you walk out of here with an activated muscle of Emunah, right? It's like a workout. And the Rambam says, I'm not sure if talking about Mashiach is going to be the same kind of workout, because it feels a little bit philosophical in nature as opposed to like really emotional. Does that make sense? So which one is it? On the one hand, the Rambam says, you need to believe that Mashiach is going to come. On the other hand, the Rambam says, don't think too much about when Mashiach is going to come. So how do we straddle both worlds? Any thoughts? How do we do that? Yes. Sorry, what's your name? Nicole, yes.
I think it's something that's very most maybe it's emotional, but it doesn't.
It's not cerebral. Yes.
It involves more basic and visceral.
Yes, absolutely. Or existential, let's say.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You know that 2 + 2 is 4 because you see 2 + 2 is 4. You know you exist because you exist. Right? And yeah, there's different ways of knowing things. Yes. Yes.
So when we talk about Mashiach, it's always as if there's a person coming and going to change the world. But I'm just wondering, is it not more of a state of being that we're all going to work towards being in a state of being of goodness and chesed, and that's what Mashiach is?
So that's a great question. It seems to me there's both. There is someone named Mashiach ben David, who's a direct descendant of King David, who's going to herald in the time of Yimot HaMashiach, the days of Mashiach, which is, as you describe it, is going to be this elated state of being. So this kind of, and we could talk about either one, I don't have a preference, but there's two kind of different structures here. The one is the person who's going to bring in this time, and then there's the time of Mashiach, which is going to be something which is going to be perhaps eternal. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yes.
Question.
Yeah.
How do we recognize
Okay, so how will we recognize Mashiach? Okay, so let's go back to, so the first question which I asked was, how do we grapple with believing in something if we don't understand it? And we have one answer, which is that belief and understanding aren't necessarily connected. I'll take it one step further, which is that perhaps when it comes to Mashiach, it's not so much about what we know or even what we believe, but it's about what we yearn for and long for. Longing is something that doesn't require knowing. In fact, the opposite. To long for something, you have to not have it. No? To quote a colleague of mine, Rabbi Daniel Rowe, he said to me, we all know what it is to yearn for something. So we can all understand what it is to yearn to not yearn anymore. We all know what it's like to miss someone. So we can understand the feeling of not having to miss anymore, not having to anticipate anymore. And maybe the belief in Mashiach is an understanding that the time will come where we won't have to anticipate anymore. It's a beautiful way of seeing it, yeah? That it's kind of, it's not about what we believe. It's about what hurts, right? That feeling of like things are not complete and all the hostages came home and the world still isn't whole yet. And I think that in the WhatsApp groups, those of you who have them, when people are like, yay, Mashiach is coming, I think that's this gut response to, so the pain's going to be over, yeah? The longing is going to be over. And I think we all know what it is to long, and therefore we can know what it is to long for a time when we no longer long. Maybe that's really the fine balance of when talking about Mashiach. Does that resonate with anybody? Yeah? Yes? Not necessarily.
Exactly. Maybe the life in the world has to be harmonious, and everybody is at peace. Then you put the whole aside.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about it like this. There seem to be two different sources in the Torah, in Navi, that talk about Mashiach. The one is, there's a description in Micha, which talks about how Mashiach is going to be this crazy, miraculous time where we're going to see miracles that are going to be greater than the splitting of the sea. Okay? Similarly, the book of Daniel, in the book of Daniel describes how there is a person, an actual person, who's going to come down from heaven, right, and bring about Mashiach. Has anyone ever seen literature like that? There's going to be this like massive, miraculous, revelation-esque moment. Yes? That's the one type of material we find. And the other one, you're all familiar with this one, is it describes in Zechariah that Mashiach is going to be a man riding on a donkey. Right? It's always nice to see that it's actually a verse in the Torah. Sometimes we think the man riding on a donkey is because like Art Scroll made a children's book about it. It's not. It's an actual verse in the Torah. Yeah, that Mashiach's going to be a man riding on a donkey. So which one is it? Is it going to be a man riding on a donkey? But there's nothing more physical than that. In fact, what's the Hebrew word for donkey? Chamor, which is connected to the word chomri, which means physical. Right? There's nothing more like physical, mainstay, natural about that. And the other side is man coming down from heaven. There's nothing more miraculous than that. So are we talking about crazy miracles? Or are we talking about the natural evolution of things? Right? And the answer is it depends. Because in Yeshayahu, in the 60th chapter of Yeshayahu, when it describes the coming of Mashiach, it uses two words to talk about the coming of Mashiach. And these two words really sit at the core of any Mashiach conversation you'll have. And maybe you've heard them before because they're so foundational. The one word is be'ita, at its correct time. Mashiach will come at its correct time. And the other word that's used is achishena. Achishena means I will hasten it, it will come quicker. And the Talmud says, well, it depends. Mashiach can come in one of two ways. Either Mashiach will come at its correct time, or Mashiach will come at a time that we will hasten. Okay, which one will be which? Well, if we merit, if we do mad, crazy amounts of mitzvahs, and we all become righteous, and we all these different things that are maybe in theory the ways to bring Mashiach, then God will hasten Mashiach in a miraculous way. But short of that, then Mashiach will come in its right time, which will be in the process of something much more physical, much more natural, much less miraculous. Okay? But there's stage 3. So part 1 could be a hastening of Mashiach miraculously. Number 2 could be Mashiach coming at his right time. even when Mashiach comes at his right time, there are different pieces of Talmudic literature which talk about how that time, and someone picked up on this, is going to be a process, not a moment. Unlike the miraculous version, which could happen in an instant, the process of Mashiach, the time of Mashiach is not just a time period after Mashiach comes, but in the lead up to the Messianic era, there's going to be a whole time period called, the Talmud calls it the Itchalta de Geula, the beginning of redemption, right? Or some people call it Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu, the beginning of the blossoming of the redemption. And it's a process. And it could be we're living in redemptive times without actually being in the time of Mashiach, right? Does that make sense? And those redemptive times sometimes are described as war, right? Anyone ever heard of Gog and Magog? Right, so that's in the end of Yechezkel. Let's speak about maybe there'll be like some sort of war, or maybe it'll be a process of us stepping up and us making choices to bring the world, not just in terms of our good deeds to bring the world to a better place, but in terms of our political movements and the place of Jews, right? And we're going to attack our enemies, and we're going to choose to bring and make the world a safer place, right? Those kinds of decisions could be part of the Itchalta de Geula, the beginning of the redemptive process, right? Which is why one of the people who was very moved by this, I'll stop here after this point and take more questions, was someone named the Vilna Gaon. Heard of the Vilna Gaon? Vilna Gaon felt that Itchalta de Geula, the beginning of the Geula process, happens when people move to Israel. This was long before he lived in the 1700s, long before there was modern Zionism. He felt that when people move to Israel, when we establish a society in Israel, when we have an army, when we defend ourselves, all of these things are things that we're doing in order to live in the Messianic period. Right? That's the Itchalta de Geula process. Sorry, I'll put the paper out or put a dummy in her mouth. Give it to Nahana. That Itchalta de Geula process is something, and therefore a lot of the Vilna Gaon students moved to Israel. And there's a famous book which is attributed to have been written by the Vilna Gaon. If anyone's curious about this, you can Google this and find it online in English. It's called Kol HaTor. Kol HaTor is a description. It's a book that talks about the time of Mashiach, and that's why we named our baby. And my baby's name is Ayelet HaShachar. Ayelet HaShachar means the morning star. The Talmud describes how when it's the darkest moment of the day, night, that's when it's about to become dawn. And at that moment, a star appears in the sky called the Ayelet HaShachar, the morning star, which tells you that the morning is going to begin soon. Right? And the Gemara compares that to the coming of Mashiach, that in the darkness, there are stars that light the way, that kima, the Talmud says, slowly, Mashiach is going to come. And we felt like with us moving to Israel, and being part of, society there and really building our home there, we felt that this baby was for us our morning star of like maybe this time of the Messianic period. She's a very Messianic child.
I've got a couple of questions. So are we definitely now in this beginning of Geula, that everyone agrees that we're living in that sort of time?
Okay, there are three answers to that question because we're Jewish, and they all disagree with each other. On the one extreme, we have someone, for example, like the Satmar Rav. Anyone ever heard of Satmar Hasidim? What do you think Satmar will say to answer Jacqueline's question? Absolutely, categorically, we are not at the time of Mashiach. The process of Mashiach has to begin in a way that there starts with prophecy. We don't know what we're doing here. In fact, he compares it to Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were told whatever they do, they must not eat from the tree of knowledge. But the Medrash tells us that had they waited till after Shabbat, they would have been allowed to eat from the tree of knowledge. So the Satmar Rav says, moving to Israel now is like eating from the tree of knowledge before Shabbat. It's going to mess everything up for everyone, right? That's the Satmar approach, which I don't think resonates with anybody here. Anyone's secretly a closeted Satmar Chassid. The other extreme, on the other side, is Rav Kook. Rav Kook says, absolutely, not only are we in the Itchalta de Geula, the beginning of the redemptive time, but we're living in redemptive times themselves. We are in the most redemptive, we are in the time of Geula. In fact, famously, Rav Kook believes, one of the pieces of literature that talk about Mashiach, talk about how there's two different Mashiachs. You heard of this? There's one called Mashiach ben David. Mashiach is a direct descendant of the Davidic line. And there's another person called Mashiach ben Yosef. And Mashiach ben Yosef is going to be the one who's going to fight all the wars and lay the grounds for the Mashiach ben David figure, right? So if you imagine the Chalta de Geula starts with Mashiach ben Yosef, and famously Rav Kook says that Theodor Herzl is Mashiach ben Yosef. So Theodor Herzl has come, Mashiach ben Yosef has come, and now we're onwards and upwards towards Mashiach ben David, which is fascinating, right? And then the middle ground. The middle ground is the one that resonates with me most, I think, because I'm very into being middle ground. The writings that I read that really help me understand and navigate, that's the writings of someone called Rabbi Norman Lamb. Rabbi Norman Lamb was the president of YU. And he speaks about how, he says, we don't know. We don't know. He says that when we speak about how Mashiach comes in Shir Hamalot, yesterday, at the end of your meal, before you benched, you speak about how when we return, Shir Hamalot, the song of ascent, but sure, when we return to Zion, we say, Hayinu kacholmim.
We used that to talk about on the hostages feedback from all four of them. We sat here in this room as they were coming out. We watched it on a big screen and we just felt like
Yes.
like we saw them returning. It was like
Beautiful. Yeah, so he says, Hayinu kacholmim will be like dreamers. This is because in Messianic times, things will be very fuzzy. You ever been in a dream and you're like not sure what exactly is happening, if it's happening, and if it's real or not real? So he said the Chalta de Geula will feel like a dream, and therefore there isn't clarity. Part of the definition of what the Messianic period has to be is something which is unclear. If you can definitively say, yes, this is the Chalta de Geula, this is Rabbi Lamb, then it's not. It has to be something which is dreamlike and foggy and unclear. And he says, you know, history has proven to us that when we get too convinced of one thing as the Jewish people, the history has become our enemy and proved us wrong. And so he says, we don't know. And it's not our responsibility to know, it's our responsibility to yearn in this dreamlike state, and to want, and to hope for, and to dream of dreaming. And that's all we can really do. Get another question.
Yeah, so the other question is, I guess irrelevant of which of those opinions you go with, if we are or we no, if we hold that we probably are in this time of what like, especially thinking about, you said like the Rambam said that this isn't really going to impact your practically, it's more philosophical question. But practically speaking, if we are in that time, what does that ask of us? Like, I understand, okay, so you feel like your family moved to Israel. That's not practical for most of us. Okay? There are some people who will be heading that direction, but here in Bushi, like what does that mean if we're trying to be part of the people that bring about the solution, like we're trying to bring us further towards Moshe? What is that asking of us?
I think that it's a question of leaning in to two things. Number one, to being part of the national identity of the Jewish people. And I think that like this Living Emunah group really does that, to really be part of Am Yisrael. You know, we see from Israel the marches and the things that happen outside it. It's really heartful. It's amazing. I had when one of the wars, school obviously, the first thing that happens is school's cancelled. And I had a 10-day-old baby and we were in a war and my kids were home from school. And I can't tell you what it does when someone who lives in London, in New York, in Manchester, and wherever it is, reaches out and says, I'm thinking of you. And how are things? It just like literally brought me to tears. Those friends who just reached out and said, I can imagine things are really crazy right now, I'm thinking of you. You know, I had the other extreme. I had a friend to call me to discuss summer vacation. She was planning to go in somewhere where I had previously been. And she wanted to know how my experiences were. And I was like, I'm not talking about summer vacations while we have missiles overhead and I have, 5 children at home and barely getting through the day. So reach out. Being part of Am Yisrael, being part of the Jewish people happens in so many ways. Number one is reaching out to friends and family in Israel. Number two, it's being part of building Emunah, being part of community, coming to Shul, coming to, marches, coming to things that build you and connect you to being part of the destiny of the Jewish people. You feel it, no? When you do these things, you feel like this is where my soul needs to be right now. My soul needs to be part of Am Yisrael, part of aligning with our people. These are my people. It's amazing how many people with the rise of anti-Semitism are like, specifically now, starting to wear a kippah in public and wear a Jewish star in public. Times where I'm not judging anybody and what they do, and I live in Israel, so it's hard for me to even comprehend what I would do. But that feeling of like being, I want to identify with, I want to be part of. I think that's important. And the other thing is prayer. In my mind, tefillah, davening is, you can never, prayers never go the wrong way. You know, I always say God has a good track record with us. He's kept us around this long. Daven for yourselves, for your families, for your children, for each other. The power of prayer is just so, we've been carried on it, you know. They had, my family is 8th generation Tzfat on one side of the family. If you've ever been to the Meiri cheese factory in Tzfat, that's my family. It's amazing. The cheese is cooled down through pipes that have the Arizal's mikvah water. That cools them down. It's pretty cool. Anyway, and so what happened was when Tzfat was conquered, the Israeli army in 1949 had no weapons. They had these old fighter jets, old fighter jets, and they flew over Tzfat in the middle of May, and the only thing they had was Coke bottles. They filled up Coke bottles with water, and they threw them down into the area, and they made this massive noise, right? And suddenly, out of nowhere, in the middle of May, it started raining in Tzfat, which happens sometimes, but very rarely. And the enemies were so, I know it sounds like I'm talking about biblical story, but it's not. This happened in the 40s. Were so scared from these huge booms of the old British planes, and the booms of the Coke bottles, and the noises, and the thunder and lightning and rain, that they all ran away, right? At the time, the community of Tzfat had barricaded themselves into the Arizal's Shul, and they were davening. And they always say, the old generations of Tzfat say, we conquered Tzfat in the merit of hard work and miracles. They said the hard work was what was going on inside of the Shul, and the miracles were the fighter jets and their Coke bottles outside. And sometimes the hard work is what happens here in the sanctuary. It's not easy. It's not easy to pray. It's not easy to work on Emunah. It's not easy to lean into that Emunah in the form of prayer. That's the hard work. And the miracles are happening. They're undoubtedly happening. But we need to also do the hard work. Can I just tell one more story? We were up north a couple of months ago with the seminary that my husband teaches in. And the most amazing experience. We go to Shul, and there were these Miluimnikim guys who were on reserve duty who come to show up to Shul to daven. And we're standing there, and my colleague turns to these kids and he says, I know these guys. They're living Ramat Beit Shemesh, right? They're serving reserve duty. They have 3-4 kids at home, their wives at home, and they're up north, all the way up north, right in Surrey. And do you remember this, Self? So she says, I'm inviting them for the Shabbat meal. So they agreed to come to the Shabbat meal, and we said to them, can we talk to our girls? So he stands up, this one guy, again, father of 3 kids, up north for the 4th time, I think, or 5th time, I don't even know, can't count anymore. And he says like this, he says, do you remember the first time that Iran attacked Israel? I was here in London, it was just around Pesach time, remember? They announced that there's like 300 and something missiles coming, and what will be, and we had no idea. None about you. I spent all night checking my phone, we didn't sleep. Right? What sort of damage, no one knew what would happen. And I think at the back of our minds, we were all like, the IDF's got this, yeah? The IDF's pretty awesome, they're gonna take care of us. So he said to us, at the time, he was up north in the same place. They called the entire unit in Shabbat afternoon, and they said, we're 99.9% sure that Iran is about to attack us. They said, the truth is, we have no idea what to expect, and we have no idea how to protect you. He said, so we're going to send 70% of the unit down south, not because they're needed down south, but because we have like bunkers down south. But we have to keep some people here. So the 30% of you who's staying here, call your families. Okay, call your families. This will be 2024. Call your families because we don't know. We don't know what will be. Again, we were naively in London saying, don't worry, Sahel has a plan. So he said to us, he said, anyone who thinks that this IDF is running on brilliance and not miracles hasn't worked for the IDF yet. If you're in the IDF, you know it's all miracles. He said, so this 30%, these couple guys, they call their family, they give brachas to their children, or their wives, and they're standing up there. They have to be on the physical border in case someone invades, right, on the ground. And suddenly they start seeing lights in the sky, right? If you've been there, if you know what it's like, they start to see lights, and there's no bomb shelter there. So they all go down. You have to put your head behind your neck, and you lie down flat on your face, and they're lying there waiting for the booms. But they were intercepted so high up that you didn't even hear booms. They just see lights, light after light after light. As he's sitting there, he's thinking of his wife and children in a bomb shelter in Beit Shemesh. And he said he started to sing the Hisha, right in the field, in the middle of, and he starts singing the Hisha Amda, Lavoten, right? For every generation, he said, Jews are the only people who one of our most favorite songs is, for every generation they try to kill us, and they keep trying to kill us, and they all hate us, and they just want to kill us, and Hashem saves us, right? That's our favorite song. And he said he's sitting there singing there, and all the soldiers all around him start singing in this field together, and the lights overhead, and they're all just singing, right? The Hisham again and again and again in the night. That's what I think that we can do here. We too can be part of that song and add our chorus and add to the symphony and add our own harmony coming from Bushi, and each community kind of singing part of that song of the hard work of Jewish prayer.
Someone else have a question for Shalvie or comments?
Interesting to say about singing. 2 weeks ago, there was this hate march in Edgewood. Very well organised, drums and loud tapes. All the Jews there singing, dancing, shut them up.
Wow. Yeah, it's a Hasidic saying, a little bit of light can dispel a lot of darkness.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do here. It's kind of like pushing away all the dark, but even in our minds that tries to overtake us, all the depressing news and all the horrible things out there. Just trying with our light. Yeah, that's what we are.
It will add one more thing, and I'll take the question, is that here's something else that you can think about doing. Love Jews. Love the Jewish people. It's easier here than it is in Israel, where things are not just so political, but things are so personal in Israel. And which side of which political spectrum, and who you think should be the prime minister, and who you think should, right? Politics aren't just politics in Israel. They're your sons and your daughters and your family and your neighbors, and it's painful and it's complicated and it's personal. I think the fact that you have one step removed in being here gives you the opportunity to really be that force of love. And just, if you see Jews who aren't like you, who don't look like you, that don't dress like you, that don't vote for the same people that you vote for, love them. I spoke in the OU recently in Jerusalem, and I said something which got outrageous. It's not being recorded. Outrageous response. I said, everyone should give a little bit of their tzedakah money to a Jewish organization that they don't ideologically align with. That's my opinion. I didn't see this written in some police saint who said it, but I think it's good for us to donate a little bit of your tzedakah money with somebody who you ideologically disagree with. Because more important than aligning your ideologies with every part of your life is loving the Jewish people. If you disagree with me, I know there are many people who do.
Okay. Do you think, because the world as it is, we are a time party? You think that's a strength? Absolutely.
I think it's by definition what it has to be. This is if you read, I'm preparing Yeshaya. The OU has a Nach Yomi. They do like a chapter of Nach every day online, the Women's Initiative. And I've been teaching Yeshayahu, which is about to launch next week. There are 66 chapters of Yeshayahu. It's been a very long maternity. And it's fascinating because I'm learning a lot of his texts deal with this idea of like the Jew in exile and coming home and rebuilding the temple and hope. And I'm reading it at a time that we're having like, missiles and the destruction of our enemies, and Khamenei is killed. And then I did a whole section about how God says, stop relying on Egypt to help you fight your enemies at exactly the time that Trump is making a deal with Iran. And it was just crazy timing. And then I went to Poland, and I think crazy. But one of the things which all the commentaries speak about is that this is the destiny of the Jewish people, to be the minority. And that is that's what we're here to do.
That's our strength.
It's our reality.
It's also true.
It can be a strength and it can be a weakness. Depends how we use it.
When two Jews meet anyway, it's always infinity.
Yes.
We might have some,
Yes.
but they get talking the final debate. That's not. But that's how close we are.
Right. Yeshayahu says, it's so beautiful. He says, I know that you see exile as a punishment. I know that you see exile as a tragedy. He says, but exile is what's going to form your identity. It's going to keep you together. It's going to keep you Jewish. Being a small number amongst the many, that's what's going to make you Jewish. Yes. Yeah.
Still,
Yeah, absolutely.
that's how many people participate. So not 12 Jewish.
Yes, exactly.
So it's program school. Join creativity.
I like that. Start a new group on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Keep Shalvie it, but joy being Jewish, no?
feel like it's about what I feel only when we are living such a black flag anti-Semitism. It's not logical. It just gets worse. There's no point. People who say terrible things online. And it's the minds seem to be taken over by something. It's just hard.
Yeah. But I have a teacher always says that the insanity of it reiterates how clearly divine it is. Meaning, if you think that we're going to find a rational reason for the Jewish people's continued existence, you won't find it. And this is a reminder of how irrational not just our hatred is, but our existence itself. It doesn't make sense. Mark Twain, right? How does the Jew still exist? And I think that, to me, I think I have two choices when I see the insane hate online and in the news and on social media. The one is to get depressed. And I don't want to be a depressed Jew. That's not the route that I'm going for. So again, I think I turn in and I say there is something so irrational about this, that there is a story that's being written here that I can't understand. There is a author, and it's not me, and it's not Donald Trump as much as he thinks it is, and it's not. There's something at play here that's beyond me, because it makes no sense. You know, one of my favorite places in the world is Poland, and people think I'm crazy. I keep going back. Anyone been to Poland before? A Poland trip? I just keep going back. I was there last month I bring my babies to Poland. Like I initiate them into the Jewish world through Poland. And I think one of the reasons is exactly this, because it's so insane. That the only way to make sense of it is that there's an author. It's not us. That's what works for me. Yes. Yes.
It's real.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
I had a Holocaust education.
You're a Holocaust education. Oh wow.
I educated 5,000 Jewish children. Yeah. And I would get absolute years in Muslim Catholic schools. And I would go to school to their country in Simba.
So you should be sitting here, not me.
And we had to inform parents by the school that they're going to go to a synagogue and etc. etc. We have never had anyone back to say,
Wow.
We have. We have here in this town, we've had recently Jews schools would come. I think that's scary.
I'm so interested in the questions they ask is absolutely amazing. It's
Yeah.
very interesting.
Wow.
It was my last story. One of my grandsons goes to get like he wanted a lot of information there. And one of my grandsons said to one of his friends, "Oh, do you want to try some of this bread? It's Jewish bread." And he went, "Really, really lovely." And he said, "Yeah, it's called Chola. It's lovely. Can I have some more?" "Yes." I said, "But I went to in one hand, I often think, around 70% of these kids, and you know, they're so respectful.
Wow. Tragic.
I've got another Mashiach question for Shalvie.
Yes.
Are we going to know is there lots of opinions, or is it going to be very, very clear that we'll know Mashiach's hit? Like I know we talk about the shape of glass, and like when we're sitting here, we'll hear it, we'll all know, we'll go. Like,
Again, if we understand that Mashiach process is a process, then I don't know at which point it's going to be like, okay, now everybody's on board. I don't know. If it's the Achishena, that Mashiach will come soon because of our miracles and because of our good deeds, and there's going to be this miraculous, then it would be a moment. Yes.
and it will be this like.
But I think that everybody agrees that Achishena is not happening. I think we're living in
Really?
Be'ita. Yeah, most people agree that we're living in, most authorities believe that, and the Vilna Gaon speaks about this extensively, that we're living in Be'ita, that Mashiach will come at the end of days, not sooner, and therefore it's going to be a process, not a moment.
I guess then is a lot of this talk about like do this so Mashiach will come feels like there's not the motivation for that then if we're not trying to aid it.
Well, again, we're the question of Be'ita, Mashiach's coming at his right time. Does that mean we have to just wait it out, or do we have to be active participants in it? That's the question. And again, the Vilna Gaon says no, you have to be active participants, even if it's coming at his own time. I'm not giving tzedakah so that Mashiach will come down from heaven. I'm giving tzedakah so that I'm moving the world towards a place where it is more and more messianic as we go in.
Because we're already in that kind of heading towards the
Yes, exactly.
So each good thing we do is helping us.
Correct. Here's a good parable for this. Imagine if you have a shirt, that you absolutely love. Maybe it's a coat. This is London. It's a coat that it's your favorite coat, and every time the second the weather starts going down and it hits winter, you're so excited to wear that coat because you love it, and you wear it and wear it and wear it, and then one day you wake up and it's boiling, and you're like, the other day you're looking in your shop, I don't want to put that coat back into storage for the winter because I love it and I want to wear it, but it's too hot to wear. Yeah, and that like feeling of like, yeah, that's one way of taking off the coat. The other one is what happens if you wear it so much that it's got holes in it, and you look at it, you're like, I don't want to own this thing anymore. I want to throw it in the bin, right? So if you understand the messianic times, if the miraculous time is very harsh, it's that moment where one day it's boiling hot, and we haven't gotten our heads around it yet because we're still in all of our winter clothing. You're like, what am I meant to do, right? In fact, they say if Mashiach just comes in a moment, it'll be too overwhelming. So what happens? We wear down all the things which are detracting from our spiritual life. We wear them down like we would wear down a good dress, right? And it gets worn and the buttons get old and it gets holes at the bottom and it's got a coffee stain here right? So we slowly, through our good deeds and through tzedakah and through community and through davening and through loving Avat Yisrael, loving Jews and all of these mitzvahs, so slowly we wear away at the stuff we don't need. So that when we get to the end of that journey, it's not going to be a shock. It's going to be a natural transition from where we're at to where we need to be.
So I'm wondering if maybe the uncomfortable feeling we have here in the UK and the anti-Semitism and feeling unsettled, that's helping us wear down.
Yes.
Till 2.5 years ago, this just felt like such an easy place to be in, and it's fine, and we all stay here in Anglo Jewry and it's strong and everything's fine. And actually, that's part of the gift, maybe, that it's okay we're not feeling so comfortable. We're making holes in the coat that we're not going to need soon.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of helping you. It's like that transitionary stage that's really easing us into. And on the flip side, I'll say like this: I have a brother who got married a couple of years ago, fun story. I taught his wife in year 10 in Hasmo and called my mother after teaching her for a week and said, I met the girl that's going to marry Yishai, my brother. And for years, I kept thinking we're going to get married, and then now they're married. I set them up when they were both old enough to be marriageable, but I'd been planning it for years. Anyway, so they're living in London at the moment. They're in Borehamwood. She's finishing her degree, and they're planning to go back to Israel. My little brother was pretty much raised in Israel. And I said to him, do you just want to live in Israel now, or do you like living in London? Right? And I think we also ask ourselves those questions. They're planning to come back, and he says to me, Shalvie, he said, it's been so nice to live in a place where I don't have to have a stand politically and figure out how I'm gonna and see my neighbors and who are also Jews, but there's so much antagonism and there's so much, and then there's missiles and then there's wars and you're checking the news because it's going to affect whether you can go on your family trip or not. And he said it's actually been so nice just to be in a community where people like each other and people are nice to each other, and it's just so good.
And it's Amazon Prime here. Yes.
And there's Amazon Prime, yeah, exactly. And there's parking spots, and
Shout at you for asking the question.
Right, exactly. And I said to him exactly what you're saying. I said, well, I think that if we lived in Israel and there was no politics and there was no wars and there was Amazon Prime, then we would forget that we're not yet at the time of Mashiach. I said, maybe, in London you have your stuff to help you remember that we're not meant to be here and that this is just the garment that you're wearing. And I said, I think in Israel, we're also just wearing a garment. We're not there yet. And we get the reminders in different ways there too. And that no place is perfect. And we each have to be reminded that there's still work to do. The hard work is not over. We're not finished. We can't just sit back and be like, we're good now. We're not. Yes, yes, that's what I'm saying. All of us. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes. You want to know what? Okay, so there's a lot to say. I'm not exactly sure what the question is. Let me give you one answer. Tell me if it satisfies you, and then I'll go a different route. Okay. There's an understanding that the world's going to last 7,000 years. It's written in all over the place in different messianic texts. There seems to be an understanding that Daniel in the Tanakh tries to figure out when Mashiach is going to come. Yaakov tries to reveal to his children when the end of days was. There seems to be a deadline. We're not sure when that deadline is. We're not sure what it means, 7,000 years. We're not exactly sure that we're in the year 6, 7, whatever year we're in. It's unclear that that's exactly the year anyway. So we're not sure when that deadline is. But I will say that there seems to be a very, very strong opinion throughout Talmudic literature that one should not try work it out either. That even though there is a deadline of when this world as we know it will end, we're not meant to know when it is. And it's not meant to be something, going back to the Rambam that I quoted at the beginning, it's not meant to be something we occupy our minds with. Right? The Hebrew, it's called Chishuv et HaKetz, calculating the end of time. Right? So when Yaakov was about to die, he tried to tell his sons when the end of day would come, and God stopped him. And God prevented him from knowing, because we're not meant to know. And maybe part of it is, if you imagine, I don't know, Rabbi Akiva, after the destruction of the second temple, thousands of years ago, can you imagine if you had gone to him and said to him, it's going to be another couple thousand years of this? I think he would have broken. I think that, knowing, I think if you talk about the hostages, every day knowing that maybe today I'm coming out is what keeps you going. And remember, the whole purpose of our whole understanding of Mashiach is hope. The Dalai Lama, when the Dalai Lama got sent into exile in India from Tibet, he brought a delegation of Jews to come advise him. There's a famous book called The Jew and the Lotus. He brings this delegation of Jews and he tries to ask them, how do you survive in exile? If one nation knows about exile, it's the Jew. He says, now that I'm in exile, tell me how to do it. And they all present all these different opinions of how the Jew survives in exile. It's fascinating. And ultimately, the Dalai Lama says, I think you're all wrong. He says, I think that the way that the Jew has survived in exile is hope. Think about how many times in our Shemona Esrei, in our Amida, we mentioned the return to Zion. How many shuls across the world do we say the Mishaberach for the soldiers? And we're constantly holding on to hope, right? And we started off with the Ani Mamin about Mashiach. They sang it on the way to Treblinka, right? The mind boggles. And that's, I think, why we're still around, is that we're not meant to know when the end is. We're meant to hold on to it. In other words, remember I started off with the animamid, and we say the Afal Pisha Yitmameh, even though Mashiach is taking his time, Im Kol Zeh, despite that, Achakelo, I will wait for him b'chol yosher v'yavo, that he will come any day. There's another way of reading that, which is Achakelo b'chol yom, I wait every day, sheyavo, that he will come. Maybe I'm not obligated to believe. I don't know. I don't think Mashiach is coming today. Honestly, I don't. But today I hope that Mashiach will come. Yeah, and it's not so much about this imminent urgency. And I think that often removes some of the pressure and the ambiguity and the hysteria almost about it. I don't know when Mashiach's going to come, but today I'm waiting. And tomorrow I'm going to wait, and the next day I'm going to wait until one day he will come. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Rabbi, I was just saying yesterday, one of the reasons you say that is so it hasn't come yet. Some people play.
Right.
They have.
Yes. Yes. We're not there yet.
So as I understand it, are you saying it's supposed to go on for 6,000 years and the world's supposed to last 7,000? So he has to find out time here also.
There seems to no, meaning there seems to be a finite time after which we'll enter into a different type of world. Maybe it's Olam Haba, maybe it's the time of Mashiach. That's a whole. You have to bring me back next year to talk about that. But this world as we know it is going to end. Yes. Which makes sense. Rav Kook speaks about this. It makes sense because everything in the finite world disintegrates and falls apart. Nothing lasts forever. So we're here to. I had a humbling moment. I had a laptop. But you know, if anyone ever bought a new phone or a new laptop, I spent hours figuring out which camera I wanted and how big the screen was going to be and all of these things. And I had it for a couple of years and then it died. And I sent it in to try to be fixed. And they called me and they were like, "We got to buy a new thing." And I said, "Can you just back up everything?" And they said, "Yes." And I came to pick up my backup and they handed me a tiny little flash disk. And I said, "But all those specs and the camera and the screen size and how many pixels and how much RAM." And that's what I got from all of that. And I said to my husband, it's such a good parable, again, taking off the coat. We wear so much stuff and we're so into all of these things that at the end of the day, we're just going to have the real things that count, that is going to be on our little flash drive. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that's why, by the way, when we talk about Itzchalta de Gula, the beginning of the Gula process, is a discussion of Gemara Megillah about whether that means the seventh day, as in, is Shabbos going to be parallel to candlelighting or to Havdalah? Meaning, which one is going to be Mashiach? At which point, and you said this, is there going to be a distinct moment that Mashiach's coming, candlelighting, Mashiach's here? Or is it going to be that Shabbat itself represents the era of Mashiach and the time in which things shift and become more messianic? Yeah, and there's that ambiguity of being like dreams.
There's a lot we don't know, but it's still coming back to the idea of working on open money. Yeah, it's okay that there's like all these opinions and all these sources. It's meant to be ambiguous.
Yes.
So, sorry.
Is there a tree or
There are people who can trace their family back to David HaMelech, yes. Not everybody, but there are people who can.
so people to observe them and as if they might be Mashiach?
No, I don't think so. Because, look, most of Jews today come from two tribes, Yehuda and Binyamin, and many of the people from Yehuda came from David. So there's a lot of people today who come from the tribe. The only people who definitely aren't Mashiach are people who are Kohanim and Nevi'im.
And then the Tisha B'Av, like Mashiach being born on Tisha B'Av, is that something real or that's something?
In my mind, what that means, in my mind, this is my opinion, in my mind, what it means that Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av is, again, if Mashiach represents hope and yearning, then I think that once again, afresh, after sitting and mourning and talking about our tragedies, we wake up in the middle of the day on Tisha B'Av and we say, "I'm ready to start hoping again. I'm ready to start rebuilding." And I think that every year Mashiach is born in my heart. Every year in the middle of the day at Tisha B'Av, I ask myself, is Mashiach born in me again? And that Mashiach-focused reality of just working towards the goal.
So we definitely need to have a part 2, and we're hoping that it's going to be, as we head towards Tisha B'Av, we're going to be coming to you in Yerushalayim with our Emunah group. That
We have a
we
guest
hope
room.
and we're yearning towards. But really, thank you for coming and sharing with such clarity and beauty.
Thank you. It's always
You're such a
beautiful to
beloved
be in
heart.
Bushy.
Very, very important on Friday, Rebbetzin Chaya Hughes, who I've shared with you, had a major cardiac arrest on Shavuot 2 years ago, is going to be coming and sharing her miraculous story with us. So please come and bring all your friends. This is one that you do not want to miss. And then we have the following Monday, we will be having our last Emunah session of this semester, I guess, starting again after the summer holidays. And anyone who would like to be involved, I am working on the new book, we're getting there. But anyone who would like to sponsor a chapter in loving memory of someone, dedicated to someone, please do click on the link I shared on the screen. Thank you everyone so much.